Hello YouTube. Today we have a little DIY how-to video for you on how to wire a three-way switch. As a layman, my first question would be, what is a three-way switch? My hubby, who is an experienced electrician with over 20 plus years in the field, is going to answer that and other questions for us today. I know, speaking personally, electricity seems scary, and that's why we decided to do a series of videos to teach everyone that it isn't as bad and probably even easier than you might think. We're going to start by introducing you to all the tools my hubby uses for this job. Hyperlinks will be included in the comments.
Hey guys, as my girl introduced me here, it was a nice introduction. As she said, I'm an electrician with many years experience in the field. I know that most of my customers over the years have told me that electricity scares them. They don't want to touch it. They don't want anything to do with it. And I've tried to explain to them many times, it's not as scary as it seems, but if you want to pay me to do it, that's fine. I'm going to try to save you guys some money today and teach you the proper ways to do this safely. And if you don't have the tools, we're going to teach you what them tools are. Like she said, we are going to provide links to these tools that you can just go on Amazon, buy the tool if you don't have it. There are comparable models. Obviously my tools mostly are professional grade. But let's start here. We have just a couple switch covers. I'm sure you guys have seen these, and the switches themselves. This is the three-way switch. You know it's a three-way switch because it does not have the on-off listed on the switch itself, and it has three screws on the back side, not including the ground. The black screw is what we call the common, and the two gold screws are what we call the travelers. The way this switch will operate is you'll always have a point of contact on your common, and as you flip your switch back and forth, it'll alternate between the two travelers, and both switches will do the exact same thing. So these will never really be in the same position. Even if they are, the light will either be on or off. You can't screw this up. When it's hooked up correctly and the travelers are hooked in the right spots, it doesn't really matter where these switches are. They're going to operate as a three-way switch, but I'm going to teach you how to connect that. And then the only other screw is the ground screw, which is green. And all that's really doing in this case is bonding the metal body of this switch so you don't get zapped. I'm sure you guys have gotten zapped off devices in the past. That's what will prevent that. So moving down to my tools, we have a set of linesman's pliers, which we'll use to twist wires together. These are a pair of, well, they call them diagonal pliers, but in the field we call them dikes. And these are nice for a lot of reasons. As electricians, we basically only use this tool, but it takes some skill to get to learn how to do that. But mostly these are used just for cutting. We have a set of strippers. Obviously, it's going to strip your wires, and it has the gauges and stuff listed on there, so that you don't have to guess if you know what gauge you're working within. Okay, sorry, can't see it. There you go. This is a multi-driver made by Ideal, which this has been my favorite screwdriver for many, many years. It's what they call a 7-in-1. It provides a number 2 flat and Phillips on that side. This side also operates as a nut driver. The opposite end of it is true, just a smaller version, the number 1 side, and a smaller nut driver.
Just so everyone knows, I also have one of these screwdrivers in my tool drawer just for everyday use in the house. Like I said, a layman, I love this screwdriver. Just, for toys, for, hanging up curtains, like anything. It's wonderful because it's all in one.
Functionality aside, this screwdriver is actually really comfortable to use too. I mean, I've used a lot of drivers over the years, and one of the biggest complaints from tradesmen will be their hands hurt. So this one does a great job at keeping your hands not from getting too painful throughout the day, because you will be using this a lot as an electrician. And one of my favorite options on this is the backside. As you can see, it's got a lot of use. My tools aren't new, guys. Is when we stick a nut in there that we're going to tighten on it, this will also operate to tighten that nut on the wire, so you don't have to use your fingertips. That's probably one of my favorite things about this driver. This is not a professional grade one. We had to replace it because these get broken a lot. So it's just to level out my my plates after we install. Which, I mean, you don't have to do that, but if you want your house to look right, you should do that. It doesn't matter which one you use of these, just a razor knife. Stanley's always worked pretty well for me. I can make any razor knife work. And a tester. Now, this tester, I don't even know if they make this anymore, but the Fluke definitely is still made. This has been my tester for my entire career, so you can see it's been pretty beat up, and they last that long. Like if you buy a good tester, and I think this tester when I bought it was probably $100. Maybe now it may cost 120 bucks. There are much cheaper ones out there. You could probably start with a tester at $20 or $30. You just need an electrical tester, something that can test voltage, something that can test your continuity is really all we look for. And this is something I always forgot throughout my career, which my hands took a beating. They've healed up over the years, but a pair of good gloves is key. And this company has been one of the best companies I've found for usability in your hands. So if you put these gloves on, they're lightweight, they don't make your hands sweat. They have a very light rubber coating on the front that will protect your skin, and they stretch perfectly to your hands so that you can use your hands and actually operate tools with gloves on. That's a really big thing. Like, you know, you look at the mechanics gloves and all kinds of other things, and they're too thick and you can't operate tools. I don't like to use gloves for that reason. I like the feel of my hands is really important, especially in electricity, because we do a lot of things by feel, but these actually allow me to do that. So we will provide them as well. The only other things I have up here is a roll of electrical tape. It's kind of mixed feelings on people like to tape things, don't tape things. It is required in some cases. We'll be using plastic boxes today, which would not require it. We'll do it anyway just to show you how it's done if you had a metal box instead of plastic. A couple of wire nuts. I prefer these Ideal tans because they seem to handle more gauges of wire without having to buy two different types of wire nut. I've never really had an issue getting my wires into these. They seem to work very well. They hold tight. And these here are, you know, they look like a little bullet. All they are is they're called a splice cap. We in the field we call them Buchanans. Buchanan because the company who makes them is Buchanan, so that's how we refer to them. But all they do is crimp around your ground wires to hold them together, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, let's get to the rest of the video. Okay guys, so we already explained the tools. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what you're actually going to be looking at. This is a demo model that I actually used to teach some of my employees with, to teach them how to wire three-way switches, because we did hire apprentices. So this is a very simple wooden box that I built very quickly, and put a couple electrical boxes on it that would mimic what a three-way switch would look like in a home, obviously a lot further apart in your house, but this is to show what we're actually doing. So you have two switch boxes, two single gang switch boxes, and they have two wires in each of them. In this particular box you have what we call the feed, which is the power coming from your panel or from any power source, and you have a three-way wire, which is the one with the red in it, this one right here, the red, the black, the white, and ground. That's your three-way wire, and it runs between the other box, and as you can see it's on the other side here, red, black, white, and ground. And then you have another wire that looks just like your feed, which you wouldn't know unless you were able to test them, that goes up and it goes to a light box, and that's the round box up here at the top. And we are going to show you in another video how to do lights, how to do single poles as well, so don't panic, we are going to show you them things. But that's all we have here. We have a wire coming in, which is the wire I have coiled up on the side here, which I could technically plug into a power source, and like I said, comes into the box. And then you have the three-way wire runs between the two boxes. So that's what you guys will be looking at as we show you the video, and we'll do our best to explain what we're doing and give you close-ups of the box itself as we continue to wire it.
Okay, so now that we're ready to actually start wiring the box, my first question would be, you know, it's very clear there's no electricity to this box. It's a DIY homemade, you know, learn on type of thing. But if I was in my home and I was wiring an actual switch, what do I do about my existing power? Like, I don't want to get electrocuted. I don't want to get zapped. So like, where would I start to be able to start working on my switches? That's a question I have.
So she brought that question up when we cut the film. It's a great question. It's obviously something that people do fear. So I maybe go grab another tool. I'm going to introduce that one to you, which would be called the tweeter. This one's made by Greenlee. Many companies make these. They all basically operate the same way. There's usually just batteries in it, and you'll hold it up to a wire, and it will tell you, it will literally light up and beep really, really fast to indicate that there's power in that wire. I don't personally like these in the field because they can give false readings. They can give false readings on a neutral. If a neutral is being shared with another circuit, it'll have very, very mild voltage in it, like say 20 volts. But this will read any voltage, so it'll tell you it's hot when it really isn't, because that 20 volts is not going to shock you. You literally wouldn't even know it was there if you took it apart. So we prefer our tester, which I did say before, is a much more expensive tool. But the way that that's going to operate is we would just put our voltage on. So you can see we're on the volt side, and it's going to show that there's 0 voltage. And to test it, you're going to need these 2 prongs. One's red and one's black. The black's obviously going to be your ground, and the red is going to be the hot. And they should have made them the same color as the wires we test, but they also test DC. So we're going to just go ahead and we're going to strip this wire. Just back a little bit. You wouldn't have to do this if you pulled this out of your house, because there would be a device already installed, and you would be testing the actual screws. So you would just pull the device away from the box a little bit, or you could even leave it in the box and test the screws right in the position when you take the cover off. So assuming that that's the case and you're just testing this for the first time, don't even bother taking this device out of your box. You can literally stick your prongs in and you can test right on the screws. And what you're going to want to test between is your common, which is where our power would be, and we're going to test on our ground side right here. But for this case, we're going to show you how to test a bare wire. So all we're going to be doing is testing between our neutral and our hot is right here, and between the hot and the ground, and they should give you the same type of readings. And if this was hot, you would see 120, 124 volts, somewhere in that ballpark. It all varies a little bit depending on the voltage in your area. But that is how you would test for voltage to see if this is hot. Now, obviously, we're going to get a 0 reading because this wire isn't connected to anything. But that being said, let's go on with what we're actually looking at here and how we determine what to hook up. Now, I'm going to teach.
Wait, so if it's hot, what do I do?
If it's hot, you're going to want to find the breaker that controls it in your main breaker box downstairs. The easiest ways to do that, if you don't have a way to test it, is just turn the light on and have somebody help you and flip breakers that you take your best guess. You don't want to just start flipping every single breaker. One thing you can kind of determine by this is if it's a white wire in there, unless it's an older wire, it would be a 15 amp circuit. It should be. It doesn't mean it will be. It should be. So you could start with those, and they're going to be single breakers instead of a double pole. Like if you see like a double pole 30, it's going to be twice as wide as a single breaker, and that's how it'll indicate that. So you're going to look for single breakers that run 15-20 amps, depending on the voltage, the size of your wire. This particular wire is 14 gauge, which requires a 15 amp breaker, and so that's what you would want to look for to start if nothing was marked in your panel. Now typically you'll see most panels are marked somewhat. It'll say lighting circuit, it'll say kitchen, it'll say something that indicates what that breaker controls. So if you're in the kitchen and it says kitchen, you might want to start there. But that's just more of a trial and error thing for most homeowners, and in some cases it's trial and error for us too. It just depends on whether the professional before us installed that correctly, or if they skipped some steps and just decided, hey, I'm not going to mark this panel today, we're going home early. So when people skip steps and don't do things correctly, it makes my job harder.
So once I find my breaker, I just turn that off, and then I'm safe to go ahead and work. The power is officially off on that circuit.
Yes.
And technically, if I don't have a tester, I don't have to run out and buy one. I could just turn my breaker off and then work?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, you can do that. Once that light turns off, and you can turn the breaker back on and indicate that the light turns on again, and you turn it off again, that will be sufficient enough to say that is that breaker.
Yes.
So, I mean, it is possible the light bulb just burn out. So that's why I always recommend to double check and turn the light on and back off, because that way you know that you're in control of that circuit. And if you can verify that you're in control of the circuit, you're just that. You're in control. So, now, assuming that nobody else would ever go downstairs and turn the breaker back on while you're working on it, If you're really worried about that, you may want to tape the box, tape the breaker, and put a little note on it saying, "Hey, somebody's working on this thing. Don't touch it." You know, or explain that to other people in the household. We have to explain that personally to homeowners very often, because they see something wrong in their home while they're working, and they go, "Oh, let me turn the light on for you." I can't tell you how many times I've been working on a light, and in my way of turning that light off was literally just shutting the switch off, and then someone comes into the room and says, "You can't see," and turns the light on and electrocutes you. So you just want to be cautious of things like that. It made me in my career learn, put a piece of tape on that so that they can't physically do it when their brain says, "Hey, something's wrong here, the light's off." We work in the dark, so we work with headlamps, we work with flashlights, or we work just in the dark in general. So that's just something that we get used to working in, and it's not normal for your average person to walk into a dark room and see someone in it and go, "Oh, there's somebody in there."
Okay, so our power's off. So what do we do next?
Okay, so our next step is going to be to identify our wires. On this particular side, I know that this is my feed side, but if you didn't know that, it's not going to matter. Most three-way switches, I'd probably say about 90% of them are going to be made up in this way. You're going to have a 2-wire. We do not include the ground when we say the size of wire. The ground's always the bare wire. So a 2-wire meaning that there's 2 coated wires. You have a neutral, which is your white, and you have a black, which is your hot. And those can operate in different senses, but we have a 2-wire here, and we have a 3-wire. You have a black, a white, and a red. And the way that this was taught to me for easily, to make it as easy as possible to remember, is the red and the black on the 3-wire are always going to be your travelers. So if you make that the case and you say my red and my black are always my travelers, it's really quite simple to determine. So you're just going to kind of push those aside and just don't think about them for now. And then what are we left with? So we're left with 2 grounds that we basically have to form into one. And that's really, really easy how we're going to do that. So that's always where we start. We start with our grounds. You're literally going to take them and cross them over each other and just spin them with your hands like this a couple times. I'm not going to cut this so that we can make up other videos, but I'm going to explain what we would have done. You're going to take one of the Buchanans that we talked about earlier, and you're going to slide that over the 2 wires till you get back in here, and all that's doing is keeping your crimping of your ground together. And I use my linesman's pliers, and you just crimp the side of this down to make it like so it can't come apart. And then the wire that's left, we'll open it up again, and we'll just take our dikes and we'll cut that off so that you're left with 1 ground. But like I said, I'm not going to do that because I have other videos to make with this demonstration model, so we're going to leave it aside. We're just going to assume there's 1 ground here for now. All right, then we're left with a black and 2 whites. The black from your 2-wire is always going to be your common, so we're going to push that aside knowing that now, and we're left with 2 whites. These whites, the one that's from the 2-wire, we know is going to be a neutral. So all we have to do with this wire is continue our neutral to our other box and to our light. So we're just going to strip these. You can make them a little bit shorter so they fit in the box better. Well, we're going to cut them down just a touch. We're going to strip the 2 wires about 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, something of that nature, so you can get a couple turns on the wire. And what I like to do is make sure, this is the most important part, is just keep the 2 ends where they're stripped together like that. Take your linesman's pliers and just give these a little turn to get it started. So you have 2 or 3 turns in there real nice, and you're just going to want to cut off right at the edge of the turn there. So you're left with about that much wire, about 1 inch, and then you're going to take one of your wire nuts. You're going to put your wire nut on, start it by hand. If you're lucky enough to have the beautiful tool that I explained to you earlier, you can save your fingers and put this in there and just turn that right on, no problem. And that's why I love that tool so much, is it just makes it really effortless. So once you have that nice and tight, you're going to want to push it up and then down and then up again and shove it to the back of the box. And you basically are going to do the same thing with that ground. All right, we had a pause for a train whistle. As I was saying,
We have trains.
yeah. So we're gonna basically do the same thing here with the ground. We're gonna tuck it. For the sake of tucking this box properly, I'm just gonna go ahead and stick my one ground in there to show you how that would have been done. We can maybe get a little shot real quick and just show you what's in that box. So it's tucked back. That's really the key thing, is because you want to make room for the device. So you're going to push these back. You don't want any really tight bends in the wire. Make sure they kind of flow. No like 90-degree cutoff bends. That's the key thing, because it'll cause problems. So now, as you can see, we're left with what I described earlier. I do have the one ground because I kind of hid that one from you guys, and that's with good reason. We're left with the single black that comes from the 2 wires, and that's how, like, this is what you'd be looking at if you took the device out of the box and you were like, well, how do I put it back together? There's 2 blacks. The way that I'm going to teach you, it'll basically be marked all the time for you. You'll never have to determine that, because all you have to determine is which wire the red wire goes to. Because if you know where the red wire goes, and you know that the black wire that's right next to it goes to that same wire, then you know the odd wire out goes to the opposite wire. So you only have 3. And this is really quite simple. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and wire this up for you. So same thing again. We're going to strip the wires. Oh. And if you use the wrong one, it's going to strip like that. Strip this one. So we want to start with about 1.5 inches of bare copper. And one of the things about these strippers, if you see these little holes that are in the stripper, those are used to make up your wires. So when you're doing your screws, you know, we know righty tighty, lefty loosey, right? So you want to turn your wire the same way that you're going to turn your screw, so that it doesn't loosen on the screw, it'll actually tighten on the screw. So you can spin these around or whatever you need to do, but we're going to start with our common. You put your wire in just a little bit, and you're going to just turn your pliers in your hand, and what that's going to do is it's going to make a nice little loop for you. And then you're going to put this on your screw, just like that. And if it's kind of open a little bit, you can just take the tips of your pliers and just kind of close the ends a little bit.
So it doesn't slip off.
So it doesn't, the idea is you just don't want that to be able to come off. Like right now, it won't come off, but it would spark everywhere because it's not tight. So we're just going to tighten it up. Oh, that's the wrong side. A lot of people like to use a flathead to tighten the last little bit. You don't got to get real crazy with these. Keep in mind these are molded in plastic, so one little turn past tight's really all you're looking for. You just want to make sure that this is tight and it's making contact the whole time. So now that your common is hooked up, you say, oh well, which one should I hook up first on these? These do not matter which one you hook up. If you want to keep uniform throughout the house, that's fine. You say, okay, so I'm going to do my common on one side, and I'm going to do my red above my common, I'm going to do my black on the opposite screw. That's fine. That's all you're going to need to do then. But it's the same sequence of events we're going to follow here. We're just going to make our little loops. We're going to put them on, like so.
So technically here you could do both blacks on one side and the red on the
Absolutely.
other. It doesn't matter.
And
So
you could do the opposite on the other switch, and it still would operate just the same. So now we're left with this, and it's going to be the opposite turn. So we're going to turn this down instead of up. So what we're going to do is spin that around like that, and we're going to be turning this way. And you say, people will ask me, like, well, how do you know which way's up and down if there's no off or on to read? And there really isn't a right or wrong answer to that. What I like is my ground facing down, because ground literally means ground. So if you have a ground, all the electricity, if there was a jolt of electricity went through this, would want to go to ground. Facing down, it just seems to make the most sense to me. If you have it facing up, it's still going to operate the same way. It's just I have OCD, so that's definitely something that I've battled with over the years, like which way's right, which way's wrong. But you have to just determine for yourself which way feels the best, I guess, in that sense. The grounds, for some reason, they like to put this little stopper on, which can cause you some headaches sometimes. So you want to close your loop a little more than the other ones. But they do make it a little bit tougher to get that ground in there occasionally. But just fit it around there. Close your loops up so that they won't come off. And tighten it up. Okay, now at this point, your device is wired. When you go to tuck your wires, it's going to be the same way. You're just going to want to push them all up and push them all down. What you want to make sure you watch out for, though, is that this bare ground and any of the other wires are not going to make contact with any of your other screws. So you want it to be an easy thing. You go to push it in, just do it like a little test run, and you look at it and go, okay, nothing's under a lot of tension. Nothing's going to make contact. It's all pushed back far enough, and then you know you're ready to actually start screwing this device into place. And you can't really screw this up. There's just 2 little screw holes, and that's it. So you're just going to want to put them in like that. And a lot of electricians at this point would use their drill, because this is kind of a time-consuming process. So we'll pause the video for this part and get you secured. Then we'll work on the plate. Okay, guys, got the device installed now. As you can see, we started with the hand driver, but what I actually used was my favorite tool is the Milwaukee 12-volt, very lightweight, easy to use drill here, and that'll get it in there much faster. I will provide a link for that as well. Very, very great tool for the money. So now we'll just be putting on a single gang switch cover, and that's pretty straightforward. You got 2 screw holes on the device itself. You're just going to start them. They don't like to push out in cases, so sometimes you may have to either push it out manually by just pushing against this like that. This seems to be the easiest way to get these screws to go right where you need them to be, so that it sits back where it's supposed to be on the device. But just get them started, and once you have them both in there and started, the only thing I would tell you is, especially in your home, that's just why we had the level sitting here, to level out either the device first and then install this, and it should just kind of work out in your favor. But put a level on it, and just out of professionalism, I like to keep my screws all facing the same way in the up position, not the over and across position. So both up in that fashion, and there you go. Switch is ready to use. And we're going to move on to the next side of the switch. Alright, now we moved on to the second box, and just like the first, it's going to look almost identical, except for the 2-wire is coming from the top, which can be another indicator of what box you're actually looking at, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to be that way. So you got your 2-wire still, white, black, and a ground, and we have the 3-wire, same as the other side, red, black, white, and a ground. Okay, and just like before, we're going to do our grounds first. We can just move everything out of the way and get our grounds out of the way. Give them a twist 2-3 times. Put your Buchanan on there. I'm not going to even bother crimping this in place. I'm just going to show you that's what you would be doing. You're going to take this, you're going to crimp the side of that just to put pressure on the wire. But for the video's sake, we're just going to push this back in there and hide it just like we did before. That would normally be cut off. You're left with a single ground. Okay, you know your red and your black from your 3-wire are going to be your travelers. So the same thing as before, we're going to push those out of the way, and then you're left with 2 whites and a black. The black from the 2-wire is going to be your common, same as before. You're going to push that out of the way. Now you're left with your 2 whites. Straighten them out. Cut them to equal length. Strip them in 1.5 inches, just as we did before. Like I said, you're going to line up your ends, like so. And when I say grab these, you want to grab them flat. Spread apart just a little bit, and that will give you your twist much easier. So you're going to twist that in there, and you're going to go ahead and cut that off at about 1 inch length. And take our wire nut, start it by hand. Like I said, if you're lucky enough to have that tool, use it. You can also use your linesman's pliers. A lot of people will do that method so they can save their fingers as well. Get that now in there tight, and then same as before, you're going to tuck this white back in that box. You can even tuck in like a circular position, as long as you don't put angles in it. And now what you're left with is the same thing. You got your two travelers, and you got your common. You can basically just take all three wires at the same time and cut them to length. I'll go ahead and strip them, and we'll determine which way we're going to spin these loops based on the device itself. So let's take a loop at our device. We want our ground facing down to keep things uniform. Our common is now on the right side, so it's the same as it is in the box. And it's facing up. We're going to turn our loop upward. Close our loop down. Put the driver on. Just like so. And then we're going to take our red, same as we did on the other side. Flip it up. We're going to close that loop down. Okay, so that side is done. And we have one down here that is going to turn the opposite direction, so we're going to bend that loop downward. Like that. Okay, all of our wires are now attached. All we have left is our ground. And we'll also go down on the same side. Close the loop. Okay. Now, same thing, take all the wires, we're going to shove them upward and then downward, and we're going to open them up a little bit so nothing is touching before we actually finish our final shove into the box. You just want to kind of shove past and make sure when you push it in there that nothing's actually going to move to make contact. And then this time I'm going to go ahead and just show you how easy this drill actually is. Much easier than using a screwdriver. Saves a lot of time. And then when you're leveling out your switch, you want to stop just short of, just a little too much, I'm just loosening up a half a turn. You want to just stop just short of tight so that the device will actually move and you have a little bit of movement there. And you can level the device as best you can by eye and then crank down that last turn to hold the device in place. But basically you just want it to be in the center of that unless the box happens to be a little off. So flip our driver, and we're just going to go ahead and put our next cover on. Oh, I pushed a little too hard and the screws come out. That's alright. Just don't lose them, because they are like a decorative screw. Never was a fan of flatheads, but unfortunately that's what they use on these. So. And that is all it's going to be to it. And it would just be a matter of...
Those are the switches, and now we have to connect them to the actual light source, right?
Well, the wire is connected through. We just have to actually hook up a light fixture so that the light would operate.
Oh, I see. But if there's an existing light fixture, that's all you need to do with your switches, and they activate. This
would just be a video on the switch replacement. We are also going to do videos on single pole switch replacement. We'll do videos on how to install the light fixture itself. We're going to do duplex outlets. We're going to do GFIs. We're going to do a lot of different videos. So keep an eye out for those guys. Give us a follow, a like. As new videos come out, you'll be informed of that. And if there's anything you actually don't know and want to see, tell us, because I'm more than happy to make the video. I have a lot of material laying around from my career that I can put to use and teach somebody else how to now do that job. It's no longer what I do, but that doesn't mean that my knowledge shouldn't get passed on, because I was taught by some very good people. But yeah, that's the end for you for this particular video, and hope to see you guys in the next one. Like I said, all the links will be provided for the tools and devices and everything we use today. So if you don't want to go shopping for it and you're not sure if you're buying the right thing, we'll make it simple. It's all right there, and you just click it and go ahead and purchase it. So I hope it helped, and if you have any questions, please ask.
Okay, thanks guys.